Will Iran be the mouse that roared? Great Peter Sellers movie, by the way. That seems to be what the Wall Street Journal editorial board is suggesting if Trump is unwilling to restart the military campaign against whatever constitutes the regime in Tehran. Did the war with Iran that began with a war end with a whimper? They ask. It's the way it looks in the cold light of this week after President Trump's announcement of the 2-week ceasefire. Will Trump really start bombing again if Iran draws out talks? Given the risk to oil prices, count us skeptical. This president can change his mind in a minute, but it sounds like the end of this round of hostilities. So what's the result? Yes, the U.S. and Israel succeeded in further degrading Iran's nuclear program beyond what they did in June of last year. The nearly 40 days of bombing also did enormous damage to Iran's military and industrial base. Yeah, as CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper said, we destroyed a military they built in 40 years over 40 days. The biggest disappointments, though, the Wall Street Journal editorial board continues, are Iran's continuing threat to the Strait of Hormuz and what happens to an enriched uranium stockpile. Mr. Trump is sending confusing signals about both that Iran is contradicting. I'm not sure his signals are that confusing, but the larger question of is he willing to go back to business if Iran dithers and remains unserious about a cessation of hostilities that includes Trump's must-haves. Both of those items I would include on that list of must-haves. Well, President Trump responded to the Ed Board. The Wall Street Journal, one of the worst and most inaccurate editorial boards in the world, I don't know about that, stated that I declared premature victory in Iran. Actually, it is a victory, and there's nothing premature about it. Because of me, Iran will never have a nuclear weapon, and very quickly you'll see oil start flowing with or without the help of Iran. And to me, it makes no difference either way. The Wall Street Journal will, as usual, live to eat their words. They're always quick to criticize, but never to admit when they're wrong, which is most of the time. Although he didn't address the underlying argument that he is unwilling to continue the campaign, that he is done with the imposition of the stick if they refuse the carrot. However, he also said of the ceasefire, such as it is, not much of one since a lot of the firing has not ceased, Iran is doing a very poor job, dishonorable some would say, of allowing oil to go through the Strait of Hormuz. This is not the agreement we have. So he's annoyed. And obviously he wants to give time for the talks this weekend. J.D. Vance, along with Witkoff and Kushner, see what they're able to accomplish. So let's adjudicate the matter. And to help us do that, please be joined by Josh Hammer, Newsweek senior editor-at-large, host of the Josh Hammer Show, and senior counsel for the Article 3 Project as well. Josh, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Do you get the sense that Trump is unwilling to resume hostilities if the Iranians are recalcitrant? I don't.
Well, I think it's way too early to make any assessments along those lines. This tentative ceasefire just went into place just a couple of nights ago. And right now, it seems like Iran is essentially holding the Strait of Hormuz hostage still. They allowed precisely one oil tanker to pass a day or two ago, as opposed to the normal 150, give or take vessels to pass on a normal basis, that they're trying to charge fees potentially in cryptocurrency. So the whole thing is a bit of a mess. And if I had to make a prediction, I do not think that this ceasefire is ultimately going to last super long. We'll see what happens in Pakistan this weekend. But if I were a betting man, I would probably wager that there will be some sort of resumption of hostilities within the next week and a half. Very difficult to put a timeline on that, but it's pretty telling that President Trump has not moved any soldiers or any other military assets, vessels, helicopters, cargo planes, any of that. He's not moved any of that out of the region. It's all kind of just sitting there quite literally, actually, in the water offshore, essentially waiting for the commander-in-chief to give the go to resume hostilities. So I don't think that this is going to last. Frankly, I hope that it doesn't last, because while it is true that the United States has definitely achieved tremendous objectives thus far, and Iran is a much lower threat right now than it was a month and a half ago. It is a severely defanged tiger. The task remains ahead. And if I understand the goal of this operation, Epic Fury, since day one, it is the neutralization of Iran as a threat to the United States and its national interest. And again, that's been partially achieved. I think it would be dramatically overstating it to say that it has been fully achieved. They still have some drones, they still have some missiles, they still have some enriched uranium, some nuclear material, and they're still able to hold the Strait of Hormuz hostage, it seems. So I'm not entirely sure that we've achieved our goals, as much damage as we've been able to nonetheless do.
Well, yeah, and Heggs had said the other day in that briefing with General Kane that we're going to hang around. You know, I mean, we're not going anywhere, so we're poised and ready. And I don't think Trump has really sent some mixed signals. If you sort of read between the lines in some of his customary rhetoric about the need to obtain that enriched uranium and the need to open the strait. Marco Rubio, he said 2 weeks ago, that strait is getting open one way or the other. So that's clearly reflective of the president's thinking as well. So, I'm not sure I'm getting mixed signals from him. I think even to the point of his sort of typical Norman Vincent Peale, like Iran and the U.S. are going to work together for us to get our hands on the nuclear dust from the strikes last June. Now, of course, Iran has not agreed to that, but he's projecting onto them what he wants to see happen. So that's still very much top of mind.
For sure. And look, there's a lot of moving parts here. It looks like the U.S. State Department is going to try to broker some sort of deal between Israel and Hezbollah this weekend. That's a whole other part of the puzzle here. And there's too many moving parts to definitively say what exactly is going to happen. If I'm just being very, very honest here, my read at this ceasefire a couple of nights ago is that Trump was probably getting a little spooked by the markets. I mean, this is Donald Trump. This is a guy who has been a businessman, and he's been in finance and real estate deals and all this his entire life there. He's basically trying just to calm the markets, I think, and to send a signal that this war is not going to go on forever, which should have been obvious, to be clear. Donald Trump has no interest in true forever wars, but I think he was trying to send a firmer signal than perhaps he has sent there. But deep down, I think he knows. Certainly, I think Secretary Hegseth knows. Certainly, I think the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Dan Kane knows. They know that the objectives, insofar as I've laid them out, have not been fully achieved yet. Again, it is definitely a tremendous partial victory, and we should not downplay that at all. There's been incredible operational, tactical, military success. The Iranian Navy, Air Force, essentially nearly non-existent at this point there, but they still do have a missile and a drone arsenal of some sort there, and perhaps even more relevant to the point, they are still able to close down this crucial waterway through which 1/5 of the world's oil is able to flow.
And to the extent that Iran was using the strikes against Hezbollah targets in Lebanon by Israel as the basis for them to play games in the Strait, as they have for the last couple of days, that's being taken off the table, as you just were referencing. And it also speaks to that relationship between Trump and Bibi that is constructive, and it seems to me that Bibi is willing to fly in formation with Trump to give him the latitude that he needs or that he wants, sort of in the moment. That seems pretty clear, and it also sort of undermines this still nagging assertion by some that that Israel persuaded Trump into this, and they're running the program, and Trump is doing their bidding, and so forth.
Yeah, look, there's a lot to be said on that. I mean, I think the most obvious thing to say is that the people who are peddling this conspiracy theory, let's call it, take a very dim view of Donald Trump. If you listen to the president is that stupid, is just a puppet, that he, the president of the world's greatest fighting force, the greatest military in the history of mankind, can be led into battle by a tiny country of 9 to 10 million people. I mean, what does that say about your assessment of Donald Trump? I mean, Trump himself has also, as I'm sure you know, been deeply consistent on the issue of Iran for 45 to 50 years now. There's literally footage of him blasting Jimmy Carter during the hostage crisis at the embassy back in 1980 of saying, why is Carter not going in, use the military there? He threatened to take over Karg Island in an interview with the British newspaper, The Guardian, back in 1988. He famously pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal the first time, cost him Soleimani assassination, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He's been very, very consistent on this for a very, very long time. As far as Netanyahu and Israel are concerned, I think it's important to bear in mind here that, look, two things are true ones. One is Israel has been a very effective ally. Hegseth was reiterating that just a day or two ago. They have gone to battle with the United States and have been, in Hegseth's own words, a genuine force multiplier. At one point, early in the conflict, the two militaries were so intertwined, a source told me that they were essentially fighting as one combined military unit. And that's what an ally is supposed to look like, in contrast to the free riders of NATO who kind of just sat on the sidelines there, even though they're the ones who are actually within missile range of Iran and also who are more reliant and dependent on Iranian oil. So that's what an ally looks like. On the other hand, Israel, again, is a tiny country. I mean, they are 1,000% the junior partner in this relationship. And when the senior partner decides that they want to take a pause for whatever reason, doesn't really matter what the reason is there, the junior partner is essentially going to listen there and wait for marching orders. Now, it's possible that there could be more of a direct disagreement and a bit of a delta between the two nations' national interests, but I don't think that day is today. Right now, I think the Israelis are basically just going along, and it's true that Hezbollah is still a big threat on the northern border. But let's not forget that Hezbollah is also dramatically defanged relative to what it was a year and a half, 2 years ago as well there. So the whole region overall, zooming out a little bit, the whole region, I think, is notably more stable and in a better place than it was prior to October 7th there. And that's really due to the tremendous damage due to Iran and its various ring of proxies, including Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Well, speaking of those Western European allies, some in properly using scare quotes to describe them. Apparently, the president talked to UK PM Keir Starmer yesterday. Starmer and Qatar, fresh off of negotiating the ceasefire, at least in his words. So the lines of communication have reopened, but it doesn't seem like Trump's posture on NATO has really moved, even after his meeting with Secretary General Rutte and then this conversation that the BBC reported that Starmer and him and Trump had yesterday.
Well, look, Rutte was actually on CNN with Jay Tapper just yesterday. I mean, and was admitting that NATO has not performed, and that Trump has good reason to be upset with NATO right now. I mean, what does that say about NATO that the general secretary of the entire organization is going on American television basically saying, you know what? The President of the United States is actually justified in having some qualms about how the alliance performed here.
Well, it says that he knows that America is integral to keep NATO together, so he's got to make sure that America gets served because, frankly, Spain and France and Canada don't matter nearly as much. Right.
No, totally. And look, the issue with NATO is that is fundamentally an organization in search of a purpose. That was not always the case. NATO was founded in 1949 for a very clear and explicit and frankly noble purpose, which was at minimum to contain and maximum to defeat the Soviet Union. The problem for NATO is actually a good problem. It's like the best problem possible. Is that it won. Like NATO literally won the reason that it was established. It won with the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and the formal dissolution of the Soviet Union into the Russian Federation 2 years later in 1991. So for 35 years now, 3.5 decades, NATO has essentially just gone along with a rather amorphous, ill-defined mission. I couldn't even tell you exactly how NATO defines its mission to this day. It seems to me to just be a vague defense of Western liberalism, which might work in a Barack Obama or Joe Biden administration, the kind of administration that will go intervene in Libya, for instance, to topple Muammar Gaddafi on purely humanitarian grounds. But that's essentially a non-starter for the more hard-headed nationalism, realism vision of President Trump. So I think these are two visions of geopolitics and how nation states and multilateral alliances ought to comport with one another. These are two contrasting visions that are now really going head to head. And I happen to think, to kind of put my cards on the table, I think that Trump's vision is essentially correct. The 21st century will be guided more by strategic, bilateral, trilateral alliances. Again, this U.S.-Israel military alliance for the past month and a half is a very good example of what that looks like in the 21st century. To me, that is the future. These bulky 30, 40 country multilateral alliances, whether it's NATO, whether it's the European Union superstructure over in Europe itself there. In many ways, I think that this is reminiscent of the Cold War and the media post-Cold War years, but it's not the way that geopolitics will be conducted in the 21st century. And Trump is fundamentally right, essentially, about NATO.
And to those who say, he's right to be critical of NATO and their performance here, many of the countries, but to go that next step and withdraw from NATO would be waving a red cape in front of Putin and Xi, and would be something that would be very destabilizing in Europe and sort of provide incentive for Putin's revanchism dreams and create a situation where America may be dragged back into have to deal with Putin if and when the Europeans can't.
Yeah, I think that America can achieve its purposes in this respect at a lower cost and with more capable allies and with overall less free riding. Russia, more generally speaking, the notion that there should be a 25, 30, 35, whatever the exact number is, country alliance to deter Russia, I find pretty farcical, frankly. Russia has been bogged down now for 4 years in the Ukraine war. They revealed themselves to be something of a military paper tiger, really one of the least efficient fighting forces currently on the world stage, based on what we can glean from what's happened there on the battlefield in Eastern Europe. The threat to America is China. China is the threat, period, full stop, end of story. To me, China is the first, second, third, fourth, fifth largest threat that America faces. All these other countries, Russia, Iran, Venezuela, back when Maduro ran it, Cuba, et cetera, they're all parts of the Chinese Communist Party's attempt to make the 21st century a Chinese century and not an American century. So to the extent that we're going to get involved in these broader alliance structures, we really have to focus on the Indo-Pacific. And if we want to get involved with, we'll call it a 3 or 4 party alliance there with some core allies, India, Japan, South Korea, maybe the Philippines, Vietnam, perhaps even, to try and contain Chinese hegemony, I would be all supportive of that there. As long as America is not overtly subsidized in there, but some sort of alliance structure along those lines makes much more sense to me, frankly, than this NATO superstructure that, again, literally achieved its raison d'etre, its reason for existing, basically the year I was born, frankly, 1989, which is the year that the Berlin Wall fell. And ever since then, they've kind of just been floating aimlessly without a purpose, kind of just waiting for people to redefine it there. But thus far, that redefinition has simply not happened.
Josh Hammer is Newsweek senior editor-at-large, host of The Josh Hammer Show, and senior counsel for the Article 3 Project. Josh, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And he joined us on Chicago's Morning Answer.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
I know that hiring can be challenging. You sort through tons of resumes and you get too many so-so applicants. You're just waiting for someone to match your role perfectly. Well, now there's a place where you can meet them fast. ZipRecruiter.
Need to hire right away. Start your search for strong candidates. The right fit awaits. Build your team. Build it sooner. Meet your match on ZipRecruiter.
Just head to ZipRecruiter.com/free right now to try it for free. And you're on your way to meeting your match. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. So try it now. Go to ZipRecruiter.com/free. Once again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/free.
Meet your match on ZipRecruiter.